once again, you've shown your own ignorance and your own lack of education on what you're even talking about. You want to talk about evolution, but you want to come at it from the standpoint of if evolution were true, then everything should be the same. I got this here. This is a biological textbook. Biology 101. First thing you learn when you go for a biology degree. It says right here, Chapter 1, Page 1, all of this stuff is contents and whatnot. So this is the very first thing that you'll look at in a lesson. It says right here, the theory of evolution by natural selection, which maintains that species change through time because individuals with certain heritable traits produce more offspring than other individuals do. So evolution requires change. You start out by saying, well, we should look at icons of evolution. That'll set us straight. Jonathan Wells, the author of it, however, is not a biologist. He's a geologist, he's a physicist. His entire purpose for his improper education in biology and his only picking up the parts that he thinks he can use against evolution is to give his ridiculous straw man argument the illusion of legitimacy. He even admitted that the only reason he even picked up his biology in the first place is to support ignorant assertions that he made while he was studying theology. That's right. He did it to support his unfounded assertion that there's a magic sky man that he knows better than you. But it certainly says something about confirmation bias on the part of his listeners, that people actually buy into that bullshit. You then compare some ape skulls and some human skulls. You used an orangutan skull. You used a baboon's face. And what's so retarded about that is that, well, first, you showed an orangutan skull and a human skull side by side. See, they're different. This one's obviously an ape. This one's obviously a human. But orangutans and humans aren't even on the same branch of the evolutionary tree. They're not next to each other. They're apart. It branches several times between orangutans and humans. And then you try to baboon. It's less related to us than an orangutan. So basically, your argument is something to the effect of, I can't possibly be related to my second cousin because we have different last names. It's a total fail. And then we get to toddler time. You try to falsify evolution by pointing out some study, which you didn't cite so that we could actually check your facts, stated that 1 out of 10,000 children, 1 out of 10,000 children, 100,000 children, under the age of 5, identified the wrong skull as human. So you show 100,000 kids a skull and say which one's human and which one's an ape. And as you stated, 99.999% got it right and 1 got it wrong. I think we're doing all right if our toddlers, our 4-year-olds, he said under 5, if our 4-year-olds can correctly identify a skull. That's a good start on anatomy. I got to admit, there's a lot more to anatomy, and that's a good foundation to start with. So kudos to those kids. What I want to know is, since when are toddlers an authority on anatomy? You're trying to say that it's wrong because somebody got the wrong skull. But that argument's like saying that germs don't cause disease because a single 4-year-old thinks that getting rained on makes you sick. It's a total failure of logic. You then switch to abiogenesis. Now, you obviously don't know what you're talking about if you think that abiogenesis and evolution are the same thing. They're not. Evolution explains how life changes over time, and abiogenesis explains how self-replicating RNA-based micelles could begin to evolve into something that would eventually become life. So your ridiculous idea that it's something you stated in another video, that if you take dirt and water and shake it up, are you going to get a cell? And you show a fully evolved modern cell, and try to compare it to a strand of RNA wrapped in a lipid bilayer. That's not even, it's a total non sequitur, and it's a total failure on your part to even understand what you're talking about. You do assert that the chance of the first amino acid forming is 1 in a trillion trillion. But what I want to know is, how do you arrive at that figure? What are the variables that you calculated to discover that it had to be that difficult? As it turns out, if you knew dick about statistics, you'd know that your number isn't accurate because there's absolutely no way to calculate it accurately. There are too many variables. There are variables that you don't even understand. There are variables that modern physicists don't understand. You can't calculate that kind of thing. Not only that, some variables make it less likely, other variables make it more likely. And without calculating specifically each individual one, you can't even begin to fathom what the actual number is. But then again, amino acids have repeatedly formed themselves under early Earth conditions. So do lipids, RNA, and proteins. All of them, when put in similar conditions to what the early Earth was like, form quite happily on their own repeatedly. It happens. Let's go ahead and assume that the numbers really are huge, as you claim. How many planets are out there that are completely lifeless? How many planets don't have an atmosphere at all? How many places could you possibly not have evolved? You take that into account, and then you say, well, hey, there's only one planet. Maybe there's more, but maybe there's only one. Under the assumption that your numbers are literally that great, there would be only one. Be 1 in a trillion. There's a trillion others out there. That's how it goes. That's how it is. And again, your lack of understanding about just simply the fact that if you're correct, that it could have only happened under astronomically huge numbers, well, there's a reason it's called astronomically huge. It's because there's that many planets. And if life didn't happen to evolve on this planet, but it did happen to evolve on a different planet, you and I would be on that planet having this conversation because we wouldn't exist here. Again, your assertion falls within what is expected from abiogenesis, and that is that it can only happen where it can happen. So you haven't falsified it. You've only made some really ignorant claims about it. Abiogenesis states that what was originally formed was an RNA micelle. Your assertion that cells can't form on their own is a total failure of knowledge and understanding. And you're not even addressing abiogenesis anymore, let alone evolution. So you're so far off topic that the topic that you're off on that you're still no longer addressing is a complete failure. And then you start talking about cetaceans, whales, dolphins, porpoises. And you say, well, how did they decide? Well, oh, they figured that the water was nice and they're going to go live back in it. No. Animals don't decide to evolve. They change over time due to changes in their environments. Cetids were in an environment where they needed to be closer to water because of rising sea levels and because of their location on the world. And over time, as they found there was plenty of abundant life in the sea, which they could happily go through and check out, over time, because they spent more and more time in the water due to a better abundance of food, because of all the other stuff that was dying off from the rising sea levels. It's part of natural selection. Some die, some don't. The ones who don't evolve. And so over time, because of the less abundant resources on the land and the more abundant resources in the water, there you have it.